Yeah, and of course we'll use to download it someplace else, and then you'll have to learn it again. So that's just technology.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, guys. We'll go ahead and get started. I ask you to mute pretty please if you're not talking.
Absolutely.
Keep background noise down. Of course, if you have a question at any time, feel free to go ahead and unmute and ask me. I'm not going to try to monitor chat until after I get done. So it'll probably be best to ask me a question, just to wave your little hand at me or unmute and ask. I'm Baroness Caterina Giovanni, like I just said a few minutes ago. My husband and I actually wrote a handout document for autocrats when we were landed Baron and Baroness. We wanted them to have something to use to help them autocrat. And so I am teaching the class based off of that document. So I can post that document as well and the slides after the class. So rule number one in Caterina and Orlando's rules of autocratting is never turn down an offer to help, or to say it another way, always have something someone can do. I also say that when I teach my feast class, because if someone comes to you and wants to help and you don't have anything for them to do, but you say, but please come back in a little bit and I'll find something, they're probably not coming back. They came to ask you and you know, they were ready to help and you didn't have anything. Yeah, you probably just lost that help. But there's all kinds of things that you can have people do. I've had little kids go and help unload the trailer because, you know, they don't mind carrying one thing because it's light and running back and forth. Or, you know, if you need to message run to somebody, or, you know, just say, hey, can you, stand here and hold this pole while we're putting this tent up. So always find something someone can do. So the main body of our document, the autocratting method, is 4 lists. And if you manage these 4 lists and keep them updated, you should be pretty well organized for your event. So let's talk about what those 4 lists are. So the event schedule is one list, what's going to happen during the day or during the weekend at the event. We schedule up to the event what needs to be done beforehand. Your assistants, who's going to help you with everything, and your on-site checklist. All of these are super important to have, and we will talk more about them as we go through. So what is your job as autocrat? The way Orlando and I see it, and you know, everybody has different methods, so this is just our method. Your job as autocrat is to put one person in charge of each item. So on each 4 of these lists, you need a name next to each thing, and you'll see that when we get to the list. You should avoid that name being your name, or that name being one of your co-autocrats' names. Now, there are some, like if it's going to be done ahead of time, that you can probably do. But if it's going to happen at day on site, you probably need to not be in charge of that. And we'll talk about those more as we get to the list. But having what we call a ringable neck for each of those things is important, and even a backup person for each of those things, because, you know, people get sick. They may have a death in the family, they may have a flat tire on the way to the event, or their vehicle breakdown, and you don't want to have your name be next to it or have nobody in charge of it, because you need to be able to pick up and run with those items that the person wasn't able to make it. Try not to place your name next to anything on the list. We just said that. So another part of your job is to hold planning meetings. John and I were talking before everybody got online that typically I feel like we have about 3 or 4 months worth of planning meetings. It's usually not more than that. Usually you don't find out that you have the bid until maybe 6 months out, so you don't have a whole lot of time, but you have enough time if you start holding those planning meetings early and start meeting with all the people that are doing things to get them, get everybody on the same page. And then the last thing, well, I think there's one more, but anyway, constantly update the 4 lists. Add new things to the lists as you find out about them. I take printed out copies of these lists to my planning meetings with me, one for myself, one for my co-autocrats, and we take notes on them. And then I say, okay, you send me your notes, I'll send you mine. We all, just have the information there so that we can all stay on the same page. And the last thing is make sure that everyone is doing their jobs at the event. So if you've done well at planning your event, the day of is going to be real smooth, and there's not going to be a whole lot for you to do, hopefully, because you want to get everything done ahead of time, have other people in charge of things, and then that way when you get there, you're kind of walking around checking in on everybody, but you're not running around with like a chicken with their head cut off. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about these planning meetings and how those are going to go. So as we said earlier, you want to take the agendas, copies of them printed out. You want to use those agendas or those lists as agendas. So I'll go through all 4 of them and, check in with each person whose name is next to something on the list and say, okay, you're in charge of water bearing. How's that going? Do you need supplies? Do you need help? Okay, you're in charge of list coordinating. How's that going? Do you need any help? And just, check in with each person. Your first planning meeting, you're going to be trying to get people signed up for each of those positions. And you may not leave that planning meeting having all of those positions filled. That's okay. There may be people that want to volunteer to help that aren't able to make the planning meeting. So what I typically recommend is get home, get your notes typed up from that planning meeting with all your coordinators and then the ones that were filled, and then post that to Facebook and to your email list and say, okay guys, we had a planning meeting today. Here's what we discussed. These are the positions that people volunteered for. Here's their name. Anything that has a blank next to it, nobody volunteered for that. So if you would like to volunteer, post on this or reply to my email or whatever and let me know. And that's another way that you can try to get all of your volunteer positions filled. And then again, when you have your second and third planning meetings, if they're still not filled, you can go back through those and say, okay, this position still isn't filled, we really need it. Does anybody want to volunteer? And yeah, that's what we basically just talked about. Okay, so here is our first list. So this is your schedule up to the event. The other thing that I recommend that people do is when you find out, we've gotten the bid, yay, we're the autocrats. If you're doing a baronial event, get with that B&B, sit down, have a planning meeting before your first planning meeting with the populace. You want to be on the same page with the B&B or the king and queen if it's, a kingdom event before you ever get in front of everybody else. You just want to get all those little details ironed out. So when you sit down with your autocrat team and the B&B or the officiants, whoever that happens to be, these are the things that you want to go and get scheduled. You want to talk about, okay, so let's go over a draft schedule of the day with the Baron and Baroness. What do you want to happen when? Where do you want it to happen? who is, going to be in charge of that. Do the champions usually run that if it's a tournament, or does the Borneo officer, get that stuff figured out? Schedule your first planning meeting with them. Find out when they want to do it. Do they want to do it after pop, before pop, or after business meeting, or another day entirely? Talk about when you want to get the website up and running. Talk about who normally does that. Is that the web minister? Do you have a web minister? Do we need someone to volunteer? Your Black Star ad, those dates you're already going to know, because it has to be in the first of the month before you want it published. So if your event is happening in July and you want it to run in June, your ad has to be done by the 1st of May. So that you'll already know. Talk to them about when they want to publish the event schedule. Maybe you're having Crown at the event, and so they need to get with Crown before, to go over when they want to have court, or maybe they're having Royal Huntsman, and so you need to talk about that. Site layout map. If you've done an event there before at that site, that can be fairly simple. I mean, you might have one to start with, and you might have some changes, but when do you want to get that done and published? Your tavern and your feast menu. Hopefully they already have that. They should have put that in their bid, but I've seen where maybe they've made some tweaks to that, or maybe that's changed. So you want to talk with your tavern crew and your feastocrat and give them the date that you need their finalized menu so that you can publish it. Your gate schedule, same thing. Talk with your gate coordinator. Is that the treasurer? In some groups it has to be. In other groups it can't be. It has to be somebody else. And so you want to talk to that gate person and say, okay, this is the date that we want to be able to publish a schedule. And so this is twofold, right? The first schedule is gate's going to open at 5 on Friday and close at midnight, and then it's going to open at 6 in the morning on Saturday and close at 2. Okay, that's one aspect. You want that to publish pretty early. But then you also want to give them a target date for when to publish their internal schedule for who's sitting gate shifts. Because a lot of times I've seen where it's, 2 or 3 days before and there's no published gate schedule. And people are going, I don't know if I can volunteer to help with water bearing or entourage or any of this other stuff because I don't know when my gate schedule is, when my gate shift is. So give them a target date or work with them to coordinate, get a target date for when you want to have that published. Probably at least a week, maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks before. And then the trailer loaded out. If you have a trailer that you're going to be loading from a baronial shed, we usually try to do that the Sunday before the event. That tends to work pretty well. You might move it to the Saturday before if you have inclement weather on the Sunday, but yeah, that tends to work pretty well for us. And again, you want a date next to all of these, and you want a name next to all of these items on this side. So, if there's one person that has a really big trailer and they can haul everything, this may be one person, but you may not have that in your group, and it may need to be, okay, so Kat and Orlando are taking a tent. Doug and Valley are taking a tent, and you have it all listed out as to who's taking what. So that's your schedule up to the event and that list. Does anybody have any questions on that before I move on to the next one? Okay. So your event schedule. So you should also go over this with your officiants, your B&B, king and queen, whoever that is. And you want to have your seneschal involved in this as well, because your seneschal is going to do the contract with your site. So they're going to know key pieces of information that you need for this, like what time can we arrive on site? Can we get there at noon, or do we have to wait? What time can we begin setup? Do we have to wait till 4 or 5, or can we be there at 10 in the morning? And then you want to get with your gate coordinator again, make sure you know what time they want to open gate. Your B&B or Crown, do they want to have a morning court? If they do, what time? How long do they think it's going to be? Get with your Shiv and Rapier officers in your group, and then also with the champions, because you're going to need their input on what time, to do armor inspections, and can they be there at that time, and if not, can they have somebody else be there? Generally, I say that when you're doing an event for a Baron and Baroness or a Crown, you're wedding planning for them. It's their day. They have final say. But you do need to get the input of all these other people as well to say, hey, their excellencies want this to start at this time. Can you be there? If not, do you know of someone else who maybe can be there that is a marshal for that can do armor inspections, etc. Feast, you want to talk about what time is that going to be? Is that going to be before court? Is that going to be after court? And then are you going to have some kind of entertainment Saturday evening? Are you going to have a bardic competition, or just a fun bardic circle, or something of that nature? And last but not least, what time are you going to close site? And so again, this is twofold. You want to close site to the public earlier than you're planning on getting off site. You want to close site to the public probably about 11 or 12 on Sunday if you have, the site all weekend. And then that way you have until whenever they need you off site to do your cleanup. Because even after everybody's gone, you're going to need to clean halls, clean kitchens, bathrooms, stuff like that. So getting all of that ironed out ahead of time with your B&B, your seneschal, the other key players is a good thing, because then when you go to that first planning meeting, you have the schedule, and not that it's not going to change, it's subject to change, but you have a rough idea of when everything is going to happen. Anybody have any questions about that one before I move on? Okay. Okay, so your assistance list. So you want to try to have an assistant next to all of these things. And you may not need all of these things for your event. This is just a typical event. And then a backup assistant, just in case your assistant can't make it. And not just their name, but their contact information. An email, a phone number, something. So site maintenance, we used to call it nasty crap. Now we want to call it something a little less, a little more PC. So we call that site maintenance. That one, you definitely don't want that to be a member of your Autocrat team. That's an all day, all weekend kind of job. Site map coordinator, that's going to be done before the event. So if you have a couple of Autocrats, 2 or 3, that could be something that someone on your team can do ahead of time. Same thing with advertising coordinator. You could do that ahead of time. You're just advertising the event, promoting the event. So if you didn't get a volunteer to do that, someone on your Autocrat team can handle that. Gate coordinator is super labor intensive the day of. You don't want anybody on your Autocrat team to have their name next to that. Site token coordinator, you can probably do that ahead of time. I mean, you could have like a little work day to get together and put those together. So that could be, somebody on your Autocrat team if no one else stepped up. Site herald in charge. Please make sure that you have a site herald in charge. I know a guy on this call right now that has shown up to events this and been roped into spending his entire weekend doing site heralding because, and I'm seeing another hand too, they didn't think of that. And, you know,
Only one event?
okay, a lot of things. But it's something that a lot of people have forgotten to consider, and we need to make sure that that's considered, and that you have a list herald in charge as well. That's not on here either, but we should probably add it too, because it's not the same person. That can't be the same person. They'll kill themselves. So.
Actually, Kat, can I throw one quick thing in there?
Sure.
Let me preface this to everyone else so you understand where I'm coming from. For 2 years, I was attending 4 populous meetings a month. So when I say all the groups in the North do it differently, there's no joke. Northkeep and Namron and Moonshadow and Wiesenfeuer are the 4 siblings that have nothing in common. In each group, how heraldry is broken down is totally different. Matter of fact, in none of the groups do all of the different heralds answer to a common herald. That's about the only thing they have in common. List heraldry usually answers to the list mistresses. That's a gross generalization. Site heraldry usually answers to the autocrat. And that's just an example. So wherever you are, take anything I say and immediately bounce it off someone who's played in your area for a while, because there are 100 different ways to do this. Okay, I'm done. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I think, unfortunately, because there isn't a set way to do it, that's how it ends up falling by the wayside. Because if you don't have it on this list and you don't have a ringable neck for it, then it's going to get forgotten. Go ahead, Valerie.
And I totally back up exactly what I was saying to the team. When we teach our heralds now, one of the things we teach them is you have to go to this person and this person and this person, because it's going to be completely different, and not to let them spread themselves thin as well if they're put in charge. Because,
No, I think that's good.
And they do it completely differently. Stargate will do it completely different than Ravensfort and everywhere. So
yeah. Okay. So this, again, this is just our Namron sheet.
No, this
change. Thank you.
I love this. I mean, because I'm a type of person that I need something like this. If I don't have something like this, it would be a big mess. But having this, can you email this out to us?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I will. I'll upload the document to the group once we're done.
I will point out, there was once a point in time in Namron where you couldn't swing a stick without hitting a herald and the herald's significant other, who was also a herald.
Yeah.
Just saying.
It's changed, unfortunately. It's changed, but okay. So back to our list. You want to have somebody in charge of coordinating prize baskets. So your stepping down champions get the prize baskets. Have something to give them that's personalized, and have people working on that ahead of time. Your website coordinator, that might be your web minister, but it might not be. It just depends. So you want to get with that officer and find out. Your site flyer coordinator, that's something you could do ahead of time. If you can't get someone to step up to do it, a member of your autocrat team could. List coordinator, this should definitely not be a member of your autocrat team, because that is a really important job that cannot be screwed up. Again, this is the B&B's or the King and Queen's wedding. And if it's, a big tournament event, this is one of the more important jobs, in my opinion, the list coordinator. You want to make sure that it's somebody that either knows what they're doing or is working with someone who knows what they're doing to make sure that things go smoothly. Water bearing coordinator, that's going to become a more interesting job as long as we're dealing with the whole COVID-19 thing. but it's still an important job. In fact, maybe an even more important job now that someone has to try to keep us all safe. Royal Liaison isn't a super heavy lift. That's something that someone on your autocrat team could do if you didn't have anyone step up. A lot of that you're going to do ahead of time. You're going to talk to the Crown if they're coming to your event. Make sure if there's a cabin available, if they want it, and that cabin's cleaned out, and maybe you put a little gift basket in the cabin with some of their favorite things, and or hand sanitizer, wet wipes, yada yada yada, stuff like that. So not a huge lift on that one. Decoration coordinator is another biggie that you want to make sure you've got someone that you really know and can trust in that position, especially if your event has a theme. If your event doesn't have a theme, it's not as big a deal. Of course, you still want your hall to be pretty, you still want the throne area to be pretty, but if you have, like we did an Arabian Nights, and they really did the decorations up really well, and if you have a theme, your decorations can make or break your event. So that's one to be careful about. And then site setup and tear down. That could be a member of your autocrat team because you're more than likely going to be there early anyway. You're going to know where everything goes anyway. But you also may have to run around putting out fires as soon as you get there. So it's really better to try to have somebody that's dedicated to doing that. And if I'm autocratting, I'm probably going to rope my husband into doing it because he's really good at it. So. Oh, sorry, I didn't ask. Any questions about assistants before we move on? No. Okay, good deal. Okay, so your last list is your on-site checklist. You want to have this ahead of time. You want to take this to your trailer loadout or multiple truck loadout or whatever it is day. You want everything that needs to get to that event on this list. And you want a name in this middle column saying who's getting it there and their contact information. So are you having an event where you're doing a tournament, so you need a list field? Okay, that needs to be on the list. Are you taking pavilions for the B&B to sit under and for Waterbury and your list coordinators? That needs a pavilion. Your site flyers, say somebody else volunteered to make those for you. Find out when they're planning to get to site because you want those there when gate opens. And if they're not planning to get to site until Saturday morning or late Friday night, you need to get them, excuse me, from them ahead of time. Your gate box and papers, ideally that's going to be your gate coordinator or your treasurer that's bringing those, but if they don't have room, someone else can. But then again, just make sure that that's going to get there. Gate opens at 5, by 4. You want it there ahead of time. Water bearing supplies usually end up coming with the early on stuff. That's, the GOTS and stuff like that. Now, supplies that people have donated are probably going to trickle in here and there, but that's to be expected. Feast and tavern supplies, does your barony or group have stuff like that? And if they do, how's it getting there? Is the feastocrat bringing it? Is the tavern person bringing it? Or do they not have room and need someone else to? Gotta figure that out ahead of time. Archery equipment and thrown weapons equipment. All of that's going to have to be set up on Friday. So you really don't want to set that up on Saturday. I've seen it happen at events. So you really want that there early on Friday. Scrolls, if you're not doing a court on Friday night, your scrolls could get there Saturday if they're coming with a scribe that you trust and know is going to make it there, is going to get them to you. Otherwise, I would say I probably want those, or the B&B probably wants those in their hands before we go. Just for, ease of comfort and ease of mind. Are you taking any loaner gear? Do you want to take loaner rapier equipment or ship equipment or archery or thrown weapons? And if so, are those officers bringing it, or is it coming with, you know, your larger load out stuff that's coming on Friday? And then MOC supplies. I know a lot of MOCs bring their own stuff, but a lot of MOCs also have children, and so they already have a lot of stuff to bring with them, and they may not have room. So I guess the main point of this list in my mind is don't assume. You know what happens when you assume, and if you assume, again, something's going to fall by the wayside. You know, if I assumed that the MOC was bringing stuff and then they assumed I was bringing it, that's not good. Yes, John.
MOC, what is that an acronym for?
Oh, sorry. Minister of Children.
Okay, thank you. I was thinking Master of Ceremonies, but
Right.
I'm glad I asked. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Okay, so any other questions about your on-site checklist? Okay, remember, have that printed out, take it with you to shed load out, take it with you to site, use it when you're unloading the trailer, because then, you know, oh my gosh, we forgot blah, 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 and maybe there's still somebody back in town that can grab it. So that is all I have. It's pretty simple. You know, like I said, if you keep track of those checklists and update them, use them as your agenda, use them at your planning meetings, things should run pretty smoothly. You should have everything pretty well accounted for. And the day of the event, you should be pretty relaxed. Anybody have any overall questions about anything we talked about, or comments, or we do this differently? Yeah, go ahead, Iva.
What would you say is the most number of direct deputies you wanted reporting to you before you started subdelegating?
Well, let's go back and look at the list. Because this minion list is my list, or my husband calls it minion, I call it assistant, because minion sounds.
Minions work. I actually like minions.
But yeah, this is about as many as I want, honestly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Okay.
6, 7, 8, 12,
One of the
14, 15.
okay.
I feel like, you know, there may be multiple people involved in some of this that are then reporting to these assistants that are then reporting to me.
Okay.
And
I had a
Go ahead.
comment.
Yeah.
On your schedule,
Uh-huh.
two other things need to be on that schedule. One, for finding a site to have the event, and two, you have to meet with the financial committee.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's very important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this, those are both very important points. But this class is assuming that you've already gotten the bid and that there was already a site, included in your bid and a budget. But yeah, you're absolutely correct. If you didn't have the bid already, you're just planning on putting in for it, yeah, you definitely need to talk to your seneschal and, you know, your B&B or whoever about the site, what can be afforded, what the budget's going to be, and all of that. Absolutely. But I consider that kind of another class, which I may need to, or somebody may need to teach, is that's putting together your bid.
That would be a great class.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've been asked to coordinate things, but I've never put a bid together. And I'm like, well, how do I put a bid together? So.
Yeah, I can put that out and see if anybody's interested in teaching it. Go ahead, Iva.
Yeah. I want to tread lightly with this comment, but I think it's, if anyone here has never autocratted before, you may run into this depending on the attitudes in your local group. There are, in certain groups, very set opinions about what you should and should not have planned ahead for. Mm-hmm. And Now, as far as extra stuff, you can deal with that on a case-by-case basis. But I can tell you by way of example that there is a group in the North that actively told two autocrats, no, you're not naming a head herald. We don't need a herald. You can deal with that the day of.
Oh,
No.
Yes. If anyone desperately wants to know, I will be happy to name names. I'm trying not to stir the pot here. My point is that when you go back to your groups and try and apply this list, which by the way, Kat, the list is wonderful. Having autocrated 2 Kingdom events and made up my own and pulled it off in 8 weeks, this is the holy grail I wish I had. When you all go back, you may run into that. You may run into someone who says, no, we don't plan X, that's done on site, it's worked for 10 years.
Definitely.
You can deal with that however you want. Just be aware that conversation might happen.
Yeah,
Right.
I've ran into that, and I'm like, nope, I have to delegate things, and this is how it's got to be. And sorry.
Yeah.
And they'll stomp off mad, and the event comes off nicely. But yeah.
Yeah. Yes, John? Oh, you're muted.
Might help if I unmuted myself. So, in the bids that I'm working on and other things, and I've done business plans, and my thought process as I look at this, and this is all like some of the stuff I hadn't seen, like the different coordinators, good to account for, but my thinking is almost like with a business plan, when you're putting together your bid, it almost seems like you put this together, and I'm new to this, so I may be
you're fine.
ahead of myself, but that you want to go ahead in your bid plan, your business plan, you want to have all of these things lined up before you even put the bid in, so that you can show that you at least have some sense of the scale of what you have ahead of you, and B, doing a plan like that forces you to look at whatever your endeavor is, and you learn a lot that you might not have thought about until the day of the event, and then you discover you need something. But if you put on a plan, it forces you to look at those things. And as far as somebody saying, oh, we don't have to worry about, that's usually the exact minute you need to worry about it.
Exactly.
That's my turn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point. And I've actually seen bids done that way, where they've already done a lot of this, where they already have people that they've talked to ahead of time and said, hey, I'm putting in this bid. Would you be my list mistress or list coordinator? Would you be my water bearer, whatever? And they include all of that. So that absolutely can be done.
Yeah.
I've also seen, and this is back to Ivo and Valerie and several other people's points of everybody does it different. Some groups and some barons and baronesses don't want you to do that because they would rather it go out to the populace and have people volunteer, and it's less exclusive of a feeling if it comes up in a meeting of, well, I wanted to water bear, and they just put in their bid that so-and-so was a water bear, and I didn't even get a chance to volunteer. You know what I mean? So that's the counter argument. I love the idea. It's great to plan ahead. It's great to be prepared, but that's the counter argument that I've run into.
I think that to mitigate that, if you know that those are the people you're dealing with, that they want to bring people, which is a grand thing to do and should be done, is that what you may have to do ahead of time is like announce, I'm putting together a bid. I'm looking for these people so that I can have this in my bid. If you're interested, come talk to me, and if you fit the job, you're going to be in the bid. So that might be the way to mitigate that. Like I said, the bids that I'm working on right now are like very detailed, and it's like the schedule is accounted for, who's doing what is accounted for, where the money's coming, all of that. So I think that if you have somebody who wants to be inclusive like that, that they're that maybe you announce that before you formalize your bid and send it in.
Sure. Another thing though that I've seen with that is as I feastocrat a lot, I've had people put me down as a feastocrat on their bid, and then they didn't get the bid for the autocratting that event. But then the other team, Autocrat team, didn't have a feastocrat. And so they came to me and said, well, you put in the feastocrat, but your Autocrat team didn't get the bid. Will you still feastocrat? And I said, well, sure. And then the other Autocrat team got mad at me because, you know, I was
okay.
changing sides, or I don't know. Yeah,
No.
it's a slippery slope either way. It really is.
Yeah,
You know.
you'd hope people could be grown-ups about that, but not always.
Right.
I will point out and all right, my opinion. If Kat says differently, then we just have two different takes on this. Part of selecting your team is you are selecting people who can work with you.
Yes.
Anyone here who knows me knows I am a type A personality, and about half the North can't work with me. I'm friends with a bunch of them. Don't ever have me work with Kat. Kat, I love you to death, but I know both of us will be at each other's throats within an hour, just because we approach things very differently.
Right.
That's a valid metric, and
It is.
I have told people, no, you're not my deputy. You're good at your job, but I'm putting someone between you and me, because we'll try and kill each other halfway through the event. And the autocrat doesn't need a criminal charge, and you don't need a closed casket funeral. And so but my point is, humor aside, that's absolutely valid. Being able to look at someone and go, I know we will not work well together, and that's not a knock on you. That's an absolutely valid way of vetting who's going to work with you. I'll quit monopolizing the microphone.
I would say in that sort of a case, I would maybe put them in this backup assistant section. And then that way you're not just completely not letting them volunteer to help because you can't get along. And then you have the assistant between you two as that buffer zone. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, Kat, one of the things that I was always taught was to open it up to the populace, but already have backup in the background. And that way, you've already talked to some people, but if other people want to do it, you can bring those two people together and have that one person be in charge and the other person be the assistant and kind of mesh it.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's a great way to go about it. Definitely. Anybody else? Comments, questions?
Well, one of the things when I did Autocrat, I kept everything together. I still have it. I kept it all in a book where I had it. And I had it at the event with all the lists and the building, the rental agreement, the whole 9 yards, so that if there was a question, I had it right in my hand. And I actually did use it at the event.
Absolutely.
So it's a great way to keep everything together, and you're not going at the last minute, what happened, what we need to do. Because everything needs to be where you can get your hands on it. And when you're in the middle of the whole event, your brain is going in 50 million different directions. Like I said, I was making checklists for myself all day.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Just like that.
That's great. I usually have just like a manila folder or a colored folder that I take with me and have all that stuff with me. Because, something's going to come up and you're not going to remember because your brain's going 100 different ways. I have to have stuff written down. If it's written down somewhere that I can go find it, all the better.
Makes life easier.
Much easier. Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, thank you guys so much for coming to my class. I appreciate it. I will get
Great
the...
class.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will
Thank
get
you.
Thank you very much.
Notes posted and the video posted, and you guys all have a very good night.
Thank you
So much.
Uh-huh,
Thank
you're
you.
welcome.
Take care.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.